Welcome into the Commander's Report. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for stopping by with us here live on a beautiful Wednesday evening to talk some Commanders football. Got a bunch of content to get to today, so I won't hold you guys up. But first up, the latest news and rumors surrounding your Washington Commanders. Just a week out from mandatory minicamp wrapping up. Then also, we got some surprise 2025 cut candidates. My updated list of cut candidates here that many of them made the team last year that I think have a chance to be cut this year. Then we'll get into 6 things that I think will be the biggest X factors to determine just how realistic the Washington Commanders' Super Bowl hopes are this year. And then we'll get into the live Commanders Q&A where you guys have a chance to get your questions on the show at the end of today's live program. So if you want to get a question on the show, if there's something that you want to ask that you want me to answer, all you have to do is get down there in the live chat, use hashtag Commanders in your comment along with your question, and then producer Joey will sift through the best questions, and hopefully it makes the show today. So for example, you just go down there in the live chat, you guys use hashtag Commanders, and for example, you put like hashtag Commanders, will the Commanders win the Super Bowl? And Joey will see that, he'll put it on the mailbag, and then I will answer it later in today's show. So if you got a question about Trey Hendrickson, if you got a question about the Terry McLaurin situation, if you got a question about how the Commanders are going to do this year, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. So get those questions in at the top of today's show, and we'll bring on our producer here, producer Joey. Joey, it's good to see you again, my friend. It's another Wednesday here on the Commanders Report. How you doing today?
We're doing great, man. Another Wednesday in the summer. Summer brings a couple of things for us here at Chat Sports. It brings a little bit more relaxing days because, it's a little bit quieter, but it also brings a little bit harder days because we got to think a little bit harder about what to talk about and things to discuss.
Got to get a little bit more creative.
You got to get a little bit more creative, but, man, the offseason, I'm ready for it to be over. I'm ready for preseason football and the season to be here as soon as possible.
Me too, man. So right now, really the main thing that's on the minds of Commanders fans is kind of the fly in the ointment, so to speak, here, which is the Terry McLaurin situation, which is, we've been expecting that the deal is going to get done at some point this offseason. I haven't really stressed about it too much, but now we are getting later into the offseason, and, there's some talk about potential, holdout in training camp and all this different stuff. What is your kind of take on the situation right now? I'm personally not that worried about it, but where are you at with the whole situation right now?
I think it gets done before training camp. I would like for it to have gotten done before then, before mandatory minicamp, just because I think you owe it to a guy like Terry McLaurin to get this done before, just because of everything he's meant to this franchise. He was holding up the entire offense on his back for the first 3 or 4 years of his career. And so he's done so much. I thought he deserved this. Hell, longer than 3 or 4 years. He's almost 30. But I want to know from you, at what point do you start getting a little bit nervous about the situation? Because you said you feel good. At what point do you kind of question that?
Every single day that we get into training camp and he's not there, like if he doesn't show up to training camp, I'll start to get a little worried.
Yeah.
Because if you're willing to take pretty heavy fines for not showing up to training camp, like that's going to be something where you got to keep an eye on it if you're willing to take that loss of money and loss of funds. But, we're going to talk about Peter Schrager and what he had to say, his latest update on Terry McLaurin today. He said, that he expects something to get done before training camp. So as long as it gets done before training camp, I'm perfectly fine. I don't want this to be a distraction once we get into camp. But, it's going to be interesting to see how this whole plays out, because obviously this is a big season for this team. It's a big season for Terry, and it's a big season for Jaden Daniels. And the Commanders know if they want to compete for a Super Bowl, Scary Terry needs to be on this roster.
Yes, 100%.
And what worries me is that Terry kind of knows he has the leverage, and he's like, pay me like $36 or $38 million per season when I'm about to be 30. And I think that's too high. I love Scary Terry McLaurin. I think he's a top 10 receiver in the game. But, making more money than Justin Jefferson every single year, if that's what he's asking for, I just don't know if I'm going to be willing to go up that high for a guy like Terry McLaurin. But, what's the alternative? If that's what he's asking for, what do? Do you just pay him just to have him on the roster?
Yeah.
Or do you trade him and try to swap him for another good wide receiver that's less expensive? I really don't know the inner details of the situation, but if he's asking for Like anything $33 million or below per season, I'm willing to give him that. Now, if it's getting up to 35, 36, that's where I'm starting to be like, well, can we trade him for somebody less expensive? Yeah. But I don't know, man. It's definitely a hairy situation.
Do you know who represents him? Do you know who his agents are?
I don't know who his agent is off the top of my head, but we're going to see how things play out here, man. But I do feel good about it, and I do think that both Terry wants to be here and the team wants him to be here. When that's the case, usually something gets done. Something gets figured out. So I think that something will get done probably shortly, close to training camp. I think we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for an answer, unfortunately, but I do think we'll get an answer eventually, and it will be good for this football team. Before we get into the stream today, before we get into the segments, make sure you guys get down there in the comment section. Type me in the chat room right now for a shout-out. I want to see all the people that are in this chat. Over 117 people are already here. We got Finley Barber, Jasmine Gray, we got Bash, we've got Wolfie, we've got Tokyo, we got Donnie Joseph, we got Richard Barker, we got Nate Rosario, Kenny Butts, we got Uncle Monk. Good to see you, Uncle Monk. We got Terry Lampkin. My beautiful girlfriend, Cassie Voth, is here as always. We've got Edit Z. We got Treyway. We've got Keek Ruiz. A lot of names that I don't recognize in the chat room today. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. We're going to be covering a lot of different stuff on today's show, guys. So you guys are in for a treat. The latest Commanders news and rumors are coming up here. Then we'll get into my surprise 2025 cut candidates for the Washington Commanders after mandatory minicamp. I'll get into 6 X factors that will determine whether or not the Washington Commanders can win the Super Bowl this year. And then, of course, again, we're going to be getting into our live mailbag at the end of today's live show. So make sure you get those questions in. Hashtag Commanders down there in the live chat. Without further ado, let's get into our first segment here, the latest news and rumors surrounding the Burgundy and Gold. Welcome into the Commanders Report. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. At the top of today's show, we're going to be breaking down a ridiculous trade idea between the Commanders and the Cincinnati Bengals that was suggested this week. Then we'll get into Peter Schrager, NFL analyst for ESPN, who shares the latest on Terry McLaurin and his contract negotiations with the Washington Commanders. So stick around to see what Schrags have to say about Scary Terry. But if you guys want a shout out on a future edition of the Commanders Report, everyone who puts in a super thanks on today's show is going to get a shout out on Monday's edition of the Commanders Report. If you guys don't know how to put in a super thanks, it's this little symbol right below the video here. It's the heart with the money sign in the middle, and you guys can send in any dollar amount. It can be a $1, $2, $5, $10 donation, and we will make sure to get you a shout out on next Monday's edition of the Commanders Report. So if you guys want to donate to the show and you want a shout out, that's how you guys can get it done today. So I think this is an absolute ridiculous idea, guys, and you guys might remember from our draft coverage this year, I wasn't the biggest fan of drafting Shemar Stewart in the first round regardless this year. He was heavily linked to the Washington Commanders. But Rigo's Rags, Ryan Heckman, suggests that the Washington Commanders, quote-unquote, need to trade for edge rusher Shemar Stewart now that he's dealing with some contract issues with the Cincinnati Bengals organization after he was drafted by them in the first round this spring. This is what Ryan had to say about the situation. The Commanders need to go all in on trading for Cincinnati Bengals' first-round pick Shemar Stewart before the opportunity gets taken from them. Stewart is in the midst of a contract impasse with the Bengals after Cincinnati has wanted to include language in his deal, which may take away future guarantees. Now, when it comes to the contract situation between Stewart and the Bengals, that is 100% true. The Bengals are trying to switch up the way that they word their rookie contracts, and the Bengals and the Bengals players inside the locker room don't want them to do that. So they're pretty much telling Shemar Stewart, do not accept this new language that they want you to sign in your new rookie contract. And there's some weird clauses in that rookie contract that not a lot of NFL teams use. So Shemar is kind of in the middle of a pickle here between him and the Cincinnati Bengals organization, who are very well known for being stingy on money and all this different stuff in negotiations like this. This is not the first time contract negotiations have gone this far into the offseason with their first-round pick. But Ryan continued on here with his reasoning for why he thinks this is a good idea, saying Stewart is the ultimate boom or bust type of prospect, but if the Commanders want to address one of their glaring needs, this could be the route they go. And the culture they've built over the past year or two has been one of a legitimate contender. And, I think that that's 100% true as well. The Commanders have certainly built a roster here and really built a team culture with Dan Quinn, the head coach, that is ready to compete for a Super Bowl this year. I don't deny any of that. But my question is, what's the price tag to get a guy like Shemar Stewart, right? So this is what Ryan had to say about what he would pay to get Stewart in a Commander's uniform. What would it take to get Stewart? That's the big question. Would the Bengals be able to fetch a future first-rounder? It's very possible, since most teams likely had him as a first-round prospect anyway. The Commanders' 2026 first-round pick will likely be later too, so they'd come out on top if Stewart pans out. Now, listen, man, I don't think Shemar Stewart was like a bona fide first-round pick caliber player in the first place. I didn't really love his production. I didn't love his film as a true pass rusher. But if the Commanders did this and they gave up their first-round pick straight up for Shemar Stewart, who, again, I'm not the biggest fan of, the Commanders would only have one draft pick next year, a third-round pick in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft. They wouldn't have a first, second, or fourth-round pick if they just give their first-round pick to the Cincinnati Bengals in this situation, and that by no means should be on the table for the Washington Commanders, okay? Now, another thing that I'll say here is that if I'm trading for a Cincinnati Bengals edge rusher, I'm going to be trading for Trey Hendrickson, all right? This is a win-now team. Trey Hendrickson is very much a win-now player. He's also, I think that the Commanders have the funds to pay him long-term as well, so I have no problem about paying him more money. And I think that Hendrickson would be by far the bigger impact right now than Shemar Stewart would be, who is a developmental, and even Ryan said it himself, he's a boom or bust type of prospect when the Commanders are trying to win now. So, I think that Trey Hendrickson would be the much better fit with the Washington Commanders. If you can get him via trade, that would be absolutely fantastic. We'll see how his negotiations continue on with the Cincinnati Bengals in the weeks to come. Plus, I think that, there's perfectly fine edge rushers in free agency. Like, if Trey Hendrickson goes back to the Cincinnati Bengals, they find a way to get a deal done. Like, I would rather go in free agency than overpay for Shemar Stewart and give the Bengals a first-round pick for his services. You guys can see here the top free agent edge rushers that we've talked about on this show ad nauseum over the last few weeks or so. I think Von Miller, Zadarius Smith, Jadeveon Clowney, those 3 in particular would be excellent signings. I think all 3 of those guys are still capable of being rotational kind of pass rush specialists for the Washington Commanders this year, and some of those guys are probably capable of still being 3-down starters for this defense this year. Plus, you don't have to give up your first-round pick in 2026 in order to get them on your roster. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Would you entertain a trade for edge rusher Shemar Stewart? And if so, at what price tag are you willing to go? Are you willing to go up to a first-round pick to bring him in like Ryan suggests? Personally, I am not, but let me know you guys' thoughts down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. In just a second here, we're going to talk about our sponsor today at Fanatics. While we're discussing Fanatics today, let me know if you would be interested in a trade for Shemar Stewart. And with that, let's get into our sponsor here, which is Fanatics today. You guys can check out their website here when you use our link, chatsports.com/Daniels, to pick up a brand new Jaden Daniels jersey from their website today. And guys, it's not just the burgundy color. They also have those awesome black jerseys that we have. They also have white jerseys. They got whatever color and whatever design that you want this to be. You can get it there. You guys can go chatsports.com/Daniels to pick up a jersey that, in my opinion, guys, you're going to be able to have for the rest of your life. Knock on wood here, but I think Jaden Daniels is going to be one of the greatest quarterbacks in this franchise's history. He's going to be the next quarterback to hoist a Lombardi trophy for this franchise. Again, knock on wood, but I truly believe in this young man. If you're with me on that, you want to get his jersey and you haven't already, help out the channel and help yourself out today by going to chatsports.com/Daniels. Move on to our second story of the day here, where ESPN's Peter Schrager went on the Pat McAfee show yesterday and said that he would be quote-unquote shocked if wide receiver Terry McLaurin isn't locked up by the Washington Commanders by the start of training camp, which is in the late portion of July. This is what Schrager had to say about the situation. All the vibes out of Washington have been incredible this offseason. The only fly in the ointment has been the McLaurin contract negotiations. I will tell you that they are motivated to get it done. I know this sounds like what we always say every time with all these star players, but Terry knows this is his window, and his agent is thinking this is when he can get him paid because this team is a rising tide, and he is the leader in that locker room. When it's the veteran guy that's done everything right every step of the way, Adam Peters comes from the 49ers organization, brought in Deebo Samuel, made a big trade to get Laramie Tunsil. I would be shocked if we're getting into training camp and Terry McLaurin is holding out and taking punitive fines for not being there. This is a guy they want to pay, a guy who stepped up and has been the great bridge between the down days of Dan Snyder and Ron Rivera at times to the high and mighty Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, high-powered offense. This is the one guy at a skill position who's been there for all of it and is truly the leader in the locker room. He deserves to get paid. I don't know the number right now, but I believe that they will find a way to get this done. They don't want to lose Terry McLaurin, and they certainly don't want to trade him. So as usual, I think that this was very well said by Peter Schrager, and it's actually pretty much exactly what we have been saying on this show for weeks. The Washington Commanders do not want to trade Terry McLaurin under any circumstances. They want him on their roster plain and simply because they know they need him in order to be the same high-flying caliber of offense that they were last year in Jaden Daniels' rookie season. And without him, I'm not saying that, this defense is going to completely, or this offense is going to completely nosedive, but the prospects of them being like a top 3, top 5 offense in the game certainly go down without their number 1 alpha wide receiver. So I do think that this is going to get done eventually. I think we will have to wait a little bit longer, probably closer to the start of training camp before we get a definitive answer on a contract with Terry McLaurin and the Washington Commanders. But as I've been preaching on this show for weeks at this point, guys, and it's being echoed here by Peter Schrager, I would be shocked if Terry McLaurin is not playing for the Washington Commanders in 2025. So where are you guys at? Let me know down there in the comments section. What is your concern level on the Terry McLaurin contract situation? Put it on a scale of 1, meaning I'm not worried at all, I'm chilling, to 10 being I'm in complete panic mode. Terry McLaurin isn't going to be here this year. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. For me, I'm sitting at about a 2. I'm not that worried about it at all. I think that McLaurin will be back with the Washington Commanders this season. That'll be it for today's edition of Commanders News and Rumors, brought to you by Chat Sports. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for extensive Commanders coverage for free every single day right here on YouTube. First segment in the books, Mr. Joey. We still got 3 more segments to go here. Surprise cut candidates up next, and we'll get into some X factors for the season. And then, of course, we're taking your questions. Don't forget, hashtag Commanders or Super Chat to get on the show today. Speaking of Super Chat, we got our first Super Chat of the day that we'll get to here momentarily.
It's given us a little bit of trouble, so I am going to kind of try to figure that out, and we'll get that sorted out.
Sounds good. In case it doesn't get figured out, John Masood sends in a $10 Super Chat, says, Jack, Joey, and Cassie. John, appreciate you, man. We'll try to get your Super Chat up on screen, but we're in a new studio here. There's some kind of, I won't call them issues, but, they're still figuring some things out.
A little bit of kinks.
Some kinks in the computer, the new computer that we got for this studio. So,
Sperry, let's talk Shemar.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Shemar, man. I think it's a terrible idea.
I do too. I don't think Shemar Stewart's going to be good.
I don't think he will either. And to suggest that the Commanders should give up a first-round draft pick to get him when you don't have a second and you don't have a fourth already next year, I think that was just a terrible idea. With all due respect to Ryan, I'm sure he's a great guy.
Yep.
I just don't like the idea whatsoever.
Yeah. It's just like Man, if you watch any draft video I did for any one of my channels along the entirety of the NFL draft season, if I ever talked about Shemar Stewart, I would just about pop a blood vessel in my face every single time because it confused me, man. He confuses me. I don't have any interest in a guy who not only just got 4.5 sacks off college, but never really improved his sack numbers. His pressures weren't all that insane either. And I know he wasn't utilized how he should have been necessarily at A&M, but I just had no interest. And so he's a good
run defender. Yes. I'll give him that, but the Commanders already have good run defenders. Yeah. Cleveland Ferrell, that's why he's here, is to be a run defender. Dietrich Wise, the reason why he's here is to be a run defender.
Yeah, it's also just hilarious. Of course this is happening in Cincinnati too.
Yeah, Cincinnati, it's just classic Mike Brown, where it's they don't pay anybody, they're super cheap. They're putting in weird language into
Yes.
his contract, saying like he can't ask for an extension.
Well, it's also like he can't have any on the field. They can get out of his deal if he has any on the field or off the field infractions.
Yeah, like,
For a guy that's also weird because he hasn't had any infractions.
Yeah.
Like, if it was a Mike Green, I'd get it a little bit because of all the allegations
Sure.
when he got drafted. But
Sure.
Shemar Stewart's kept his nose clean.
Yeah.
Like, it's so strange.
It really is strange, and doesn't surprise me because the Bengals are going to be the Bengals, and that organization has a very long track record. I mean, I remember one year they were on Hard Knocks, and their first round pick that year was not on Hard Knocks until like the final episode when he just signed his contract like a week before the season because he didn't even participate in training camp. Like this isn't the first time the Bengals have been in a holdout with their first round pick before. Like they've done this multiple times before, and it won't be the last.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're still in the middle of a contract dispute with their other projected started edge rusher in Trey Hendrickson.
Yes.
So hopefully the Bengals continue to Bengal, and hopefully Trey Hendrickson becomes available via trade because I think the Commanders would be the team to probably get him. But we'll see, man.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting situation for sure, but under no circumstances should he be a Washington Commander this year. No Shemar Stewart, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into our next segment here. Some surprise cut candidates after mandatory minicamp are coming at you guys right now. Today on the Commanders Report, I've got my updated list of 8 surprise Commanders cut candidates after the events of mandatory minicamp in Ashburn, Virginia, just a few short days ago. Before we get into my cut candidates here, guys, make sure you click that thumbs up icon if you are pumped for training camp. I know I am, man. I am so excited for this season. Like, I mean, there's never been this kind of juice surrounding a Washington Commander football team, especially, for a long time. There was some juice last year with Jaden Daniels coming in, and there was a lot of excitement. But we haven't seen expectations like this in Washington in a very long time, and I'm super excited to see if this team is able to bank in on those expectations here in 2025. So if you're with me on that, click that thumbs up icon. And just so we're clear, before we get into my list here, this is not a predictions video where I'm saying all 8 of these players are for sure going to get cut. That's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is to let you guys know some players that might be on the bubble that were either former starters, they've made the team before, and it's a little surprising to some people when I say that they could be cut by this team this year. This is not a predictions video. This is these players could be cut if they don't have a good training camp video, just so you guys know. So we'll start here with Percy Butler. Last year played quite a bit for the Washington Commanders as their third safety. Of course, their every down guys were Quan Martin and Jeremy Chin. But when they went to their 3 safety packages, which was quite a bit, Butler was the third guy that came in. He played over 440 snaps, almost 450 snaps for this defense last season. That's quite a bit. But when he was on the field, let's just be honest, he was terrible. 98th out of 98 NFL safeties in Pro Football Focus grading last year. That 41.3 grade is like Emmanuel Forbes level territory right there in terms of how bad that grade is. So, he's certainly somebody that's still on the team. He's got experience as like kind of a pseudo starter or rotational player in this defense. But, Will Harris, to me, the safety that they brought in to quote unquote replace Jeremy Chin, is kind of a very similar type of body type and style of player to Butler in terms of the role that the team is going to be asking him to play. So I think that, we'll talk a little bit here in just a little bit about what the team expects from the bandit safety position, which is what Jeremy Chin played last year. But in terms of that other kind of deep safety to play alongside Quan Martin, I think that's going to be Will Harris. Percy Butler's role in the defense is certainly up in the air at this point. Then we get to Jeremy McNichols, the running back. And honestly, guys, I thought McNichols had a good season last year. He showed up in some big moments. There's some injuries in this running back room last year. And, on 55 carries, he had 261 yards. That's really good efficiency, and had 4 touchdowns for your backup kind of depth running back. Like, he's a decent receiver out of the backfield, can be a decent, third down back. I have nothing against Jeremy McNichols, and I think he's actually a pretty decent pro. But you look at the running back room, and, you've got some youth in there. Brian Robinson Jr. is is still pretty young. Chris Rodriguez Jr. is still in there. They just drafted Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in the 7th round out of Arizona, who is absolutely turning heads, or was turning heads during the offseason program this year. You still got Austin Eckler, who's a shoo-in to make the roster. So it's going to be a question, A, how many running backs do they keep on the 53-man roster? Could be 3, could be 4, probably going to be 4. But, if there's going to be 4 guys, somebody between Chris Rodriguez Jr. and, of course, Jeremy McNichols is going to have to go, because I think that the guys that will for sure make the roster, Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, there's only one more spot. So I could see Chris Rodriguez Jr. get cut. I really could. But I could also see Jeremy McNichols being that guy, that odd man out. So it's going to be an interesting competition in camp. It's going to be one of the ones that I keep my eye on here. The 2 questions of, A, how many running backs do they keep on this roster in week 1? And then B, which one is going to be the 4th guy that they keep? We'll see. But let me know down there in the comments section of, which running back you would want to cut. Type JM for Jeremy McNichols, type CR for Chris Rodriguez Jr., or type B for both. My guess is, guys, is that whoever they end up cutting, they're going to want to bring back to put on the practice squad, so they won't be completely away from the team. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. If you had to cut one of these 2 running backs, which one are you going to cut? And we get to Noah Igbenogany, another player that played a lot of snaps for this team last year with the lack of good play that the Commanders got out of their cornerback room last year and injuries and all this different stuff. Igbenogany played almost 1,000 snaps for this defense last year, was a starter for them come playoff time, all this different stuff. But like Percy Butler, even though he had a lot of snaps, it wasn't very good. A PFF grade in the 40s. There's only one cornerback that was eligible for a ranking here that was worse than Noah Igbenogany. So it was definitely a point of emphasis here to add somebody that was better than Igbenogany in this room this offseason. And, I think their plan was, let's move Mike Samerstroh back into the slot and let's get some help on the outside. They did that by getting Jonathan Jones and then, of course, Trey Amos in the 2nd round of the NFL draft this year. Marshawn Lattimore will be back this year, fully healthy, which is very good. But Igbenogany could make the team as a backup that has experience on this roster, but it's certainly a possibility as well that he ends up getting the axe if he doesn't have a good training camp. Michael Gallup is somebody that, hasn't really been in the league over the last couple of years. He's a big body, former true X wide receiver that can, come down with contested catches when he was playing with Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. But, now he's older than what he was back in those days, and, he's already dealing with injuries again. Missed some practices during mandatory minicamp with an injury. So I think there's a chance that even though he's a bigger name, that he could be a cut candidate for the Washington Commanders this year. And somebody that, just frankly, I don't think is very good, KJ Osborne. He got some production with the Minnesota Vikings when he was playing with like Justin Jefferson in Kevin O'Connell's beautifully designed scheme there in Minnesota. But Justin Jefferson gets triple teamed, okay? And then when you have a really good play caller like Kevin O'Connell that knows that, you can really scheme things open for your number 3 wide receiver. That's why every single number 3 receiver that has ever played with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota has been super, super productive. And ever since Osborne has left the Vikings, he hasn't done jack squat, all right? So I don't think he's a good route runner. He doesn't bring a lot of great size to the table. He's not really a run blocker type either. I think that there's better receivers on this team, frankly, and I'm not going to completely count out the idea of this team adding another receiver, especially with Noah Brown going down with an injury at mandatory minicamp as well. So make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already, if you are enjoying the show. It really does help us out with the YouTube algorithm, guys. It takes a half second of your time to click that thumbs up icon, but the more people that like this video, the more YouTube's going to throw this video in front of other Commanders fans like yourselves, and it helps us increase our reach. So if you want to help us out today, click that thumbs up icon. We greatly appreciate you. We'll talk about Trent Scott here, an offensive lineman. I actually thought Scott played pretty well when he had to come in and play for Sam Cosmi last year in the playoffs at guard. He's been absolutely atrocious as a tackle, and I'm actually open to seeing how he does in training camp here to see if what kind of value he can bring as a guard. But he's certainly somebody here that I don't expect to be a starter or anything like that. And there's certainly some new faces in the interior offensive line group this year. Guys like Nate Herbig, Brandon Coleman is transitioning from tackle to guard as well. So Scott's role in this offensive line is certainly up in the air. Then Michael Dieter, somebody that was just playing terrible last year when he played. Let's just call it for what it is. I thought Trent Scott actually played a lot better than Dieter when they were both called on to play last year. So I actually think Dieter is more in danger of being cut this year, especially with Nate Herbig's versatility as a center. So you got Tyler Biadasz as your starting center, obviously, and you obviously need somebody in your interior offensive line group that can also play center. Nate Herbig, I think, is a better player than Dieter is, and I think at the end of the day, he gets that backup job, which leaves Dieter out in the cold, and that's where I kind of feel about this interior offensive line as it stands right now. Then the final surprise cut candidate on today's video, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, last year's 7th-round pick out of Notre Dame. Got some opportunity last year with some injuries at the edge rusher position. Honestly, didn't play all that well, but he was a rookie. And now they've added a bunch of names to that edge rusher group. They got guys like Jacob Martin. They got Dietrich Wise this offseason. They still have Cleveland Ferrell. They still have Dorrance Armstrong. You're starting to run out of spaces here for Javonte Jean-Baptiste to make the final roster. So I don't want anybody to be surprised if JJB ends up being cut this year. So let me know down there in the comments section who is a Commanders player who will surprisingly not be on the final 53-man roster this year. Give me your answer down there in the comments section, and that'll be it for today's edition of the Commanders Report by Chat Sports. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and until next time, guys, go raise some hell. Second segment in the books, Mr. Joey. We got 2 more segments to go. Up next, my X Factors that are going to make or break the Washington Commanders playoff or Super Bowl hopes this year. And then we're going to get into the mailbag here. Just another reminder, guys. I don't know how we're looking on questions yet.
We're looking pretty good. I mean, we could always use more, but I think we're sitting at a good spot right now. We've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all from 8 different people as well.
Cool.
And so keep those questions rolling in, guys. 226 people watching. We can at least get like 5 more questions. Yeah. I know we can.
Yeah, let's get a couple more questions in there. If you want to guarantee your question gets on the show, you guys can super chat. Any dollar amount, and you guys can make sure your question gets on the program today. But I'm not going to hold you guys up any longer here. Let's get into our third segment of the day. My 6 X Factors that will determine whether or not the Commanders can win the Super Bowl in 2025. There's no doubt that there are Super Bowl expectations in the nation's capital this year when it comes to the Washington Commanders after getting to the NFC Championship game in Jaden Daniels' rookie season. So today, we're going to be breaking down 6 variables that I think will determine just how good the Washington Commanders can be in 2025 and whether or not they can win the whole thing and hoist a Lombardi trophy this season. Before we get into my 6 X Factors for the 2025 campaign, predict it for me to kick off today's show. What will be the Commanders' record this season? They won 12 games last year, and I would argue the team is better this year. So do you think they get back to that 12-win mark, or do you think they even exceed it? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section to kick us off. So my first X Factor for the 2025 season is the question: just how good is this defense going to be? Because last year, the defense, I would say, had their moments where they had good games and there were certain things that they were better at than other things. But generally speaking, this was a bad defense last year. And, the big crux of this was the bad secondary led by guys like Emmanuel Forbes and Michael Davis and Benjamin St. Toast and all these different guys that just couldn't hold up on the outside. And you guys can see the numbers here. Even though the points per game allowed and the yards per game allowed, they were kind of more around league average. Some other kind of main metrics there, yards per play allowed, that the efficiency wasn't fantastic. The red zone percentage, they allowed a lot of touchdowns in the red area. The EPA per play was not in the top 20 either. They weren't taking the football away as much as you would have liked them to. It wasn't the worst defense in the National Football League, and given the talent on this team last year, which wasn't a whole lot, if we're being completely frank with you, I think that Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. deserve a lot of credit for what they were able to get out of this defense last year. But plain and simply, these numbers came with a defective cornerback room, which I think is a lot better this year, right? Marshawn Lattimore was playing with an injury last year when he was playing for the Commanders. He had a hamstring issue, all right? He doesn't have that anymore. Hopefully he can stay healthy this year. Then Trey Amos, I do expect to be the week 1 starter. I think he'll win that job over Jonathan Jones in camp this year. He's a phenomenal rookie talent. And then Mike Samerstroh, who pretty much had to be your number 1 outside starting corner, almost the entire season last year, now gets to move back to his more natural position in the nickel. So this cornerback room is so much better than it was a season ago. And if this defense can go from below average, which let's be honest here, it was last year, to an above average defense this year, I'm not even asking for like top 5 defense or even top 10 defense. Those things would be great, but that's not necessarily what I think the Commanders need to do. Their offense, as we know, is going to be explosive. They're going to put up points. They don't necessarily need like an elite defense to win a Super Bowl this year. They just need a functional one. And I think that if they can do that, that's going to take this team to the next level. Some defensive kind of points of emphasis here that's going to allow them to accomplish that goal. First up, Marshon Lattimore, who we briefly touched on earlier here. But the big question with him is he still a legit number 1 corner? Because when he's healthy, he's usually like one of the better shut-down, press-man, physical corners in the National Football League. And let me tell you guys, this guy looked impressive during Commanders' mandatory minicamp this year when he did show up. He didn't show up to OTAs. He did show up to minicamp, and he is flying around. He looks 100% healthy. And, you know, I think Trey Amos is a really good player. I don't know if he's ready to become a true number 1 right away in year 1. And Jonathan Jones definitely isn't a number 1 guy. They're really banking on Marshon Lattimore to take down guys like A.J. Brown, Malik Neighbors, you know, the top wide receivers in this division. Also George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb. You know, that's going to be very interesting matchups there with the teams in the division. But I think Marshon Lattimore is up for the task. I think that this team definitely believes in him. And, you know I believe in him if he's healthy and he's on the field. Then we get to another one here on the defensive side of the ball, which is who and or just maybe this is a better question, do they get another edge to add to this group? Because you got Dorrance Armstrong, you got Dietrich Wise, Cleveland Ferrell, and Jacob Martin. All those guys are functional players, but I don't know if any of those guys are pass rushing specialists and if any of them are a true number 1 edge rusher. And this has kind of been the main theme over the last several months of our coverage here, guys, is that we've been looking for possibilities for this team to add a legitimate number 1 pass rusher on the outside. And there are options out there, and I think the Commanders are taking their time because they're kicking the tires on Trey Hendrickson. If they can land the NFL's leading sack getter to their defense, I think that they're going to take every opportunity to try and do that, especially when guys like Von Miller, Zadarius Smith, Jadeveon Clowney, older but still effective veterans are still on the free agency market. There's no reason for the Commanders to rush this, all right? They're going to see how the Hendrickson thing plays out, and if he signs a new deal with the Bengals, I almost guarantee you they're going to sign one of these guys in free agency pretty darn quickly after that. And then, the big question is the guy that they bring in, just how good and how much better does that make the Commanders defense heading into the 2025 season. Then the final X factor when it comes to the defense is, does a legit bandit safety emerge? Okay, because last year you had Jeremy Chin, who played kind of that hybrid linebacker / safety role when they went to their 3 safety packages, and now he's in Las Vegas, and he is a Las Vegas Raider. And, the Commanders' kind of replacement for him was Will Harris of the New Orleans Saints previously, who came here. He's more of like a Percy Butler type, though, to me, where he's going to be another kind of deep safety when you go to those 3 safety packages. So the question still remains, who's going to be that linebacker / safety, kind of a bigger pass coverage type of player that's going to be a ball hawk in the middle of the Commanders' defense. We've seen guys like Jaron Kearse play this role for the Cowboys when Dan Quinn was the DC there. We saw it with Jeremy Chin last year with the Washington Commanders. I think that what they're looking at right now is Jordan McGee, the second-year, technically linebacker out of Temple, but he's an undersized linebacker, but he's a really good coverage player. So I think his body type and his athleticism is a perfect match to play that bandit kind of safety role in the Commanders' defense, and they'd be essentially playing a 3 linebacker package instead of a 3 safety package technically, but it's kind of the same thing where you've got that linebacker safety hybrid player that you can put all over the formation, all over the middle of the field, and can go hunt interceptions and hunt the football. So I think McGee will probably get the first crack at that in training camp. He's had a really good offseason program. This team and this coaching staff really expects a lot out of him this year, and I think that he's going to fill that role nicely. So answer the question for me down there in the comments section. The Commanders will have a top blank defense in the NFL this year. Will they get up to top 15, top 10, even top 5? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section for today's pinned question. In just a second here, YouTube's going to throw you an ad break, and when they do, go down there in the comments section and let me know how good the Commanders' defense is going to be this season. Let me get to the offensive side of the ball, and Deebo Samuel is a big X factor, and I think we all acknowledge this. He didn't have the best season last year with the San Francisco 49ers, and as a receiver, he's always been kind of a gadgety type of player where he gets in the backfield. He does some running back type stuff as well, and he's been doing that over the last several seasons. But, the last 3 years as a receiver, it hasn't been nearly as productive as that 2021 campaign where he had over 1,400 yards and 6 tuds as a receiver and 77 catches. Hasn't gotten to over 1,000 yards receiving in the last few seasons. Now, he has gotten over 1,000 when it comes to when you include the rushing stats, but Deebo is certainly somebody that's going to be playing a unique role in the Washington Commanders offense this year, led by Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, and I fully expect him to use Deebo as a true gadget player. Put him in the backfield, use him on orbit motions and jet sweeps, use him on those early down wide receiver screens that we know Cliff absolutely loves to run. He is an absolute locomotive in open space. He's super tough to bring down. He's built kind of like a running back. So, I don't think anyone's expecting Deebo to be like a legit number one alpha type receiver, but I think he's a perfect fit inside Cliff Kingsbury's offense. And if he can provide another element to this offense here, along with Jaden Daniels and his playmaking prowess, Terry McLaurin is a legit number one alpha type wide receiver. Adding another element to that is going to make this offense even more dangerous. So let me know down there in the comments section, what is your confidence level in Deebo Samuel heading into the year? Put it on a scale of 1, meaning he's going to suck this year. He's going to be benched. He's terrible. This is the last year he's going to be in the NFL. To 10, meaning he's going to be unbelievable, Pro Bowl caliber player. I can't wait to watch him play. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. And then the final X factor for me is, can someone step up at wide receiver 3? And, I think it's pretty cut and dry who their number one guy is. That's Terry McLaurin. He's their number one alpha-type receiver on the outside. Then Deebo Samuel will be their technical number 2 receiver, but, they're going to move him all around the formation, all right? So they're going to need some contributions from guys like Noah Brown, like Luke McCaffrey, like Jalen Lane, like maybe even Michael Gallup, where you're going to have some guys that can play on the outside and on the inside, depending on where you're putting Deebo Samuel in the offensive formation. And Noah Brown is dealing with an injury right now. He got carted off the field at mandatory minicamp. At the time of me recording this video, we still don't have an answer as to what his injury is. So we'll see what it looks like with him. I really do like Noah Brown's skill set, though. Good run blocker, big body, big play threat. That's a good route runner and with solid hands as well. So I like Noah Brown. He played pretty well with this team last year in the limited time he played for this offense. But then other guys like Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane certainly have some upside as well. So if they can find a legit number 3 receiver, we talked about Deebo adding another element to this offense. If they find another legitimate receiver alongside Terry and Deebo this offseason, this offense is just going to go to the next level with Jaden Daniels throwing him the football. So here is a little bit of a recap here of our X factors. How good is the defense? Marshawn Lattimore, is he still a number 1 corner? Are they going to add another edge? And if so, who do they bring in? Also, do they find a legit bandit safety? Does Jordan McGee answer the call? Also, how valuable is Deebo going to be to this offense? And can they find a legit number 3 receiver? I don't think that Jaden Daniels is an X factor because I think I already know how he's going to play. He's going to play great. So if you can get these 6 things, guys, watch out, because I think the Washington Commanders will be legit Super Bowl, not only contenders, but favorites heading into the postseason this year, and will be one of the more complete teams in the National Football League as we get towards the postseason. And like I said, guys, I think that there is a reason to believe here that this team could absolutely be a Super Bowl contender this year. And like we look at all the things, is it reasonable to think this defense could be better this year? Absolutely. The secondary is so much better, and they could still add another edge rusher. Is it reasonable to think that Deebo Samuel could be a success in this offense? Absolutely. He's been doing all the different stuff Cliff wants him to do for years in San Francisco. Is it possible that Noah Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane step up in secondary roles at the wide receiver position? 100%. So I think everything that we talked about today is 100% within the reach of the Washington Commanders, and if they can reach that and they can kind of hit on these question marks, I think this team is going to be damn dangerous, and I think that they're going to give themselves a really good chance of hoisting a Lombardi Trophy come February. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we're going to be covering every single second of the Washington Commanders 2025 campaign right here for free on the Commanders Report. So click that subscribe button for daily coverage. All right, we've got our segments out of the way here, Joey.
Yes,
now
we do.
We are about to get into our mailbag. Did we get a couple more questions in there?
We did. We're all good for mailbag questions.
right.
They brought it today. Some good questions, lots of them. Give me some good ones to choose from. So shout out to Hog Mafia for bringing it today.
Hog Mafia, we appreciate you guys. We're going to get into this mailbag here, and just so you guys know, even when I'm in the mailbag, you guys can still get your questions in. So if a question pops up in the middle of the mailbag and you want to put it into the mix, don't be shy. Continue to put #Commanders in the live chat. Let's get into it right now. The latest questions that you guys have for me on this week's Commanders Report mailbag. Welcome into the Commanders Report mailbag. I am your host, Jack Sperry, and as I say every single week, this is my favorite segment that I get to do every single week because I get to answer questions on the Washington Commanders directly from you guys. All right, you guys have questions, I have answers, so without further ado, let's get into those answers. But before we get into the questions today, click that subscribe button if you haven't already to join the most interactive fan community for Commanders fans anywhere on the YouTube platform. We're also the largest individually run Commanders news channel anywhere on the YouTube platform with over 40,000 subscribers. We also go live every single Wednesday for our weekly live show where we film these mailbags. So if you guys want to get a question on a future Commanders Report live show and mailbag here, join us every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for our Commanders Report live shows. All right, we're going to start here with Ronnie England Jr. Says, does Brian Robinson Jr. earn a contract extension this season with his production? I think it'll be an interesting discussion, and there's going to be multiple variables here, Ronnie, that go into this, all right? Number one, how does Brian play this year? Now, if he becomes absolutely undeniable and he's like a top 5, top 10 star running back, then the Commanders are pretty much going to have no choice. They got to bring him back. But, I think that if he has just an okay season like he's had the last several years here in Washington, I think it's going to come down to how much money Brian is willing to take because I think that this team really likes him. He's a hard worker. The players in the locker room like him, and if he's willing to take a team-friendly deal to stay, I think that the Commanders would be happy to keep him around. He's still relatively young. And I think that they like him. And, when you have a guy like Jaden Daniels at quarterback who's a dynamic rushing threat as your quarterback, you don't need to have like an elite number one running back necessarily to have a really good run game. This team was top 5 in rushing EPA last year. And I mean, I like our running backs, but I don't know if any of these guys you would consider like a top 5 running back in the league, right? So I think that Jaden Daniels provides a lot for you. So if Brian's willing to take a team-friendly deal to stay, I think that's something the Commanders will consider. Then we get Kenny Lewis here. Says, Jack, do you see Ben Sinnott and Luke McCaffrey having breakout years this year? I sure hope so, man. Luke looked damn good during mandatory minicamp. Multiple touchdowns scored with the first-team offense during mandatory minicamp team periods. And then Sinnott is somebody that's very athletic, somebody that's a really good route runner, quick feet for his size. It's really rare. But he's got kind of shorter arms, so his catch radius for a guy that big is actually not as impressive. He's had some drop issues because of that. In his career, and Zach Ertz is still here, and this is an offense that usually bases out of 11 personnel, which means 3 receivers and just 1 tight end. Now, and then when they do go to those multiple tight end sets, they just signed John Bates to a multi-year extension, and he's their true blocking type. So I'm curious to see what their plan is for Sinnott this year. We'll see if he gets on the field and how much he gets on the field. But with Luke McCaffrey, man, if Noah Brown's going to be out for a while, if he's going to be hindered with that injury, whatever it was during mandatory minicamp, Luke's got a hell of an opportunity here to prove himself if the Commanders don't bring in another receiver. Got one from It's Torch, says, do you envision a scenario where Brandon Coleman becomes an all-pro at guard? Maybe down the line. He's got the physical tools to do it. He's a big body. And I do think that, I said this, when he got drafted by the Commanders last offseason during our draft coverage, I think he's a guard. I don't think that he marries his feet and his hands all that well, which you have to be able to do as a tackle. We saw that problem come up for Coleman last year at left tackle. But that's not as much of an issue when you're playing guard. So he's got the physical tools to be really, really good. All-pro, that means you're one of the best guards in football. We'll see how good he can become, but I do think that is the right move for this organization and for this offensive line. I think the team made the right decision putting him inside and kicking him inside. While also getting Laramie Tunsil, by the way, who's the best pass-protecting left tackle in football, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm very optimistic about the future of Brandon Coleman. So fill in the blank for me. Down there in the comments section, the Commanders have a top blank offensive line in the NFL this year. Do you think it's top 10, top 15, top 20? Do you think it stinks? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds, and when that happens, take advantage of that time by letting me know just how good the Commanders' offensive line is. Got one from Ken Gray. Says, what about signing both Zadarius Smith and Jadeveon Clowney? Well, I think that they're going to just add one, Ken, and here's why. All right, they like some of the players they brought in this offseason. They like Dietrich Wise. They like Jacob Martin. They like, of course, Cleveland Ferrell, who they're bringing back. And, of course, Dorrance Armstrong is still here. Like, if you add both of these guys, then you have to start wondering, do you cut Jacob Martin? Do you cut Cleveland Ferrell? And I don't think they want to do that, all right? They signed these guys relatively early in free agency for a reason. So I think that if they're going to add another edge rusher, it's just going to be one. I'm perfectly fine with Dorrance Armstrong being your number 2 starting edge, and then the other guys rotating in. And I don't think this team necessarily needs 2 more edge rushers. I think they just need one good one, and I think there's some good ones still out there. Going from Fantastic Fun 21 says, would you accept this trade, Terry McLaurin in a first-round pick for Jalen Carter and Devontae Smith from the Eagles? Well, I mean, probably not. If I'm being honest with you, I kind of like the interior that the Commanders have built this offseason. And then also, I don't want to give up my first-round pick next year because as we discussed earlier in the week with the Shemar Stewart trade idea where somebody suggested the Commanders should give up their first-round pick for Shemar Stewart in a trade this year, if you do that, you only have one pick in next year's draft in the first 4 rounds, all right? And it's a round 3 pick. That is like you're not adding any new talent, new starter talent in the draft next year if you make that trade. So no, that's not something I would be interested in. Fantastic fun, but definitely a fun idea. Then we got one from League Bound says, do you re-sign Debo if he finishes the year under 1,000 receiving yards? So what's interesting about Debo is that his production just doesn't come from receiving yards, right? He's going to be used as a rusher in this offense as well. And he was used as a rusher there in San Francisco. You look at his numbers over the last several seasons there in San Francisco, his receiving numbers haven't gotten to 1,000 yards since 2021, but he's had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage multiple times since then because of the rushing production that he has. So I think, if we're talking about if he's under 1,000, total yards this year as this team's number 2 offensive weapon, I would say probably not bringing him back next year. Obviously, it has to be in the context of, if he gets injured or, how the season goes, all this different stuff. But, I think that he's going to have to be productive this year if he wants to come back as a player for this team in 2026. But before we get into the rest of the questions this week, go ahead and check out our friends at Fanatics where you guys can get a Jaden Daniels jersey in your closet today. All you have to do is go to chatsports.com/Daniels to pick up a JD jersey for yourself today. And if you don't have one of these things yet, man, I mean, they're selling like hotcakes, and there's a reason for that, man. Like, this is a jersey you're going to be able to wear for the rest of your life as a Washington Commanders fan. It also helps out the channel because if you click our link down in the comments and description, chatsports.com/Daniels, and you make a purchase, Fanatics sends us part of the proceeds here at the Commanders Report to continue our work, giving you guys free and informative Commanders videos every single day. So if you want to help yourself out, help us out as well, chatsports.com/Daniels, and make a purchase. Got one from one of my favorites here, Jasmine Gray says, I have a question for you, Jack. It is Terry McLaurin is staying here in Washington to play. Yes, he is going to be staying here. He wants to be here. The Commanders want him to be here. It's just a matter of how much money, he's worth. And I think Terry knows he has the leverage here because he knows how important he is to the team, and he knows that he can pretty much name his price, and Washington is going to have to come to the table. So I do think it's going to be a very lucrative contract. We'll see, how lucrative it is. We'll see if he's asking for more than Justin Jefferson. I wouldn't love having to pay him more than JJ because I don't think he's better than him. But, anywhere between like 30 and 33 million, I think is more than fair. We'll see what the actual number ends up being and what McLaurin's asking for. But yes, I do think that something will get done between McLaurin and the Commanders before the season. Got one from Edit Z says, will the Commanders sign James Cook. Well, he's currently on the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills are shopping him, but, he wants to get paid a lot of money. All right? Like, he wants to, Dalvin Cook, his brother, has quote-unquote joked about paying him like $30 million per season. That's what he's going to be demanding on his next contract. And it's like, that's not going to be happening, man, plain and simply. And, running backs, obviously, they don't get paid as much as receivers. They don't get paid as much as quarterbacks. But James Cook seems to want to kind of push the envelope and be the highest paid running back in football. And the Commanders don't necessarily need a guy like that, man. Like, they don't need to be paying a running back all that money because, their run game last year, as we discussed earlier, was a top 5 rushing attack in the league without a top 5 running back. And part of the reason for that is you got a quarterback that can run the football as well. So I don't think that's a move that's very wise for the Washington Commanders personally. And I think somebody else will take the bait on James Cook. Got one from TK here, says, who do you think will lead the Commanders in rushing yards this year? It's a good question. I think it will be Brian Robinson Jr. if he stays healthy. Now, Jaden, I think, will actually get close because Jaden, as we know, is just special with the ball in his hands out in open space. But I do think Brian Robinson Jr. will lead the league or lead the team in rushing yards. And, I think Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, as the season goes on, will get more and more work. And I think Austin Eckler will also have a pretty productive season as well. But I do think B-Rob, at the end of the day, if he stays healthy, will lead this team in rushing. Got one from Terry. It says, do you think the more national exposure the current Commanders are getting will help past players like Lyndon Fletcher and Brian Mitchell get into the Hall of Fame? Honestly, no. Honestly, I don't. Unfortunately, those guys I think definitely deserve to get in there. But I don't think that the national exposure necessarily helps them out because, people on the national televised games are not watching Lyndon Fletcher and Brian Mitchell, right? They're watching Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin and Daron Payne and the guys currently on the Commanders, not the old school players. So, no, I don't think that that's going to push them forward, unfortunately. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comments section. Should Fletcher be in the Hall of Fame? I'm a clear yes on this. He's an awesome player, man. He was an awesome player. Deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. If you're with me on that, type those yeses. But if you disagree, type those nos. All right, some great questions once again this week, guys. If you guys didn't get your question on this week's mailbag, we will be doing another mailbag next week on the Commanders Report live show. We go live every single Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern time, so click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and join us for our live shows every single week to get a question on a future edition of the Commanders Report mailbag. All right, so Joey, that wraps up our segments for the day. So really
yes, it does.
Once again, another good round of questions from the people of this community. That's why I love this community so much. You guys always bring the intelligence when it comes to the mailbag questions and the nuance. And, a lot of people will just ask, any dumb question or whatever. But, the thing I appreciate about this fan base is that they know ball and they ask good, informed, and educated questions. And that's why I definitely appreciate this group. Joe, you got anything else you want to talk about before we head out today?
Eagles fans could never.
Eagles fans could never. All right, those guys are fucking nuts, and we all know that. All right, we work with a couple of them here.
Yeah.
But that'll be it for today's show, guys. We'll be back next week with another live show. We got more videos coming your way throughout the week. You're not going to want to miss any of that content. So click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And from me and Joey this week, guys, hail to the Commanders.